Hello and welcome to this panel discussion on the future of transport. I'm Alan Martin, Deputy Editor of Alphr, and on my right is Bobby Hellard from IT Pro, and on my left is Ed Munn, also from Alphr. So I want to start off this discussion a little bit about driverless cars, and there are obviously many interesting things going to be coming out from driverless cars. For you in particular, Bobby, what is the most exciting change that's going to happen?
Well, hopefully, if it all works out, we'll be able to include more people in society, like elderly that have given up their driver's licenses and people that are disabled, be able to get about more and won't be so reliant on other people to get their transport or their doctor's appointments and things like that.
So purely practical things from you. Ed, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the idea of being able to sort of enjoy your car journey if you're the sort of person who drives somewhere every single day. I know that I used to commute for an hour and a half, which a lot of people drive for a lot longer than that in a car every day, and you feel very restricted to not being able to do anything. I mean, the radio or a podcast is the limit, so the idea of being able to watch a TV series or sort of enjoy a phone call rather than feeling like you've got to keep your eyes on the road is all good stuff, I think.
Yeah, and I mean that's interesting in that respect because companies like Uber are spending quite a bit on looking at ways to avoid motion sickness and car sickness in these things because they appreciate we're suddenly going to have a lot more time. I mean, for me, there's all kinds of reasons to be excited, and one of those is just suddenly we get a lot more time, but also just the reduction in carbon emissions and so on, and just clearing up the roads if cars can continue to just autonomously drive around and wait to pick you up later. And also not having a driver's license is particularly appealing. But the real question for me, though, is how long will it take people to get comfortable with driverless cars and the idea that they're being driven around by a machine and not not themselves and not fallible but known quality humans? What do you think, Bobby? What can we do?
I don't think we'll totally get everyone on driverless cars. There'll always be sort of a mix. It's just what percentage is higher or not, and how they integrate on the roads.
So sort of the proof is in the pudding, really.
Yeah.
Ed?
I mean, for me, I think that the technology's already shown that it can be trusted in a particular context, really. So I think the idea of trusting them on motorways and dual carriageways and even country roads where there are sort of fairly known sort of risks and hazards. I mean, as everyone has to do in their driving test, you have to take a hazard perception. It's all about spotting these different things. And on those sort of roads, actually, probably things are fairly simple and can be managed quite easily by a computer. But then when you take it to a busy town centre or city is where things get a lot more interesting because you've got hazards absolutely everywhere and complicated junctions to deal with and roundabouts and all the rest of it. And that's where I think that it's going to take people some time to really sort of trust that a computer is capable of doing this and also capable of doing it alongside humans who may be making mistakes themselves. So.
Yeah, and I mean, all countries are not created equal in terms of the infrastructure that's ready for them. For example, the way that traffic is followed in London compared to say Calcutta is just entirely different, and it's a different set of challenges for driverless cars. I mean, one of the things that we're looking about as a big reason to go driverless is that carbon emissions, as I said before, and most of these, all of these are actually looking to be electric for those reasons. But also the UK is looking to phase out petrol cars by 2040. Is that a realistic ambition, do you think, Bobby?
Perhaps for the UK, mostly in London, I would have thought, because it's got more funding than everywhere else. Yeah, it's whether they can get more sort of charging bays and get more accessible for people to use driverless cars around the city and the country.
And do you, Ed? Is a petrol-less future? Are people ready for EVs, essentially?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, recently I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to test the London electric taxi.
Yes.
And I suppose that's an interesting question about moving fully away from petrol and diesel. Is something like the London electric taxi actually still has a 1.6 litre petrol engine in it. It's designed to sort of have a capacity of around 80 miles a day on its battery. And then you've got that backup engine to fall back on if the battery technology doesn't take you far enough, basically, particularly if you're driving into or sort of out of London at each end of the day in order to do your shift in a black cab. So I think this idea of not having petrol and diesel probably is a little bit more nuanced and grey rather than black and white. In that, yeah, I think a lot of them are going to be hybrids and things that maybe aren't fully electric. But yeah, we'll be moving to much cleaner energy on the whole.
The Hyperloop, Elon Musk's invention-ish of the sealed tubes that can go up to, I can't remember the exact mile per hour figure, but it's very fast indeed. Is it actually going to happen, Bobby?
I don't know, but if it does, it's kind of the same as the driverless cars. Is can we convince people to travel in a steel can with no windows at ridiculous speeds, and why they're going to be comfortable with that?
Yeah, it does feel like if you get travel sick now, it feels like you're going to get really travel sick in a vacuum like that. Ed?
Yeah, I think it's probably still some way off because particularly from a personal point of view and living in the UK, it can feel a really, really long way off because our rail infrastructure leaves a lot to be desired as it stands at the moment. So the idea of suddenly making this leap from what we've got now in the UK, not that it would necessarily be implemented in the UK first, but just the idea of that technology feels a long, long way away. Whereas I suppose if you're somewhere that already has very fast rail networks like Japan, something like that might feel a bit more sort of, realistic.
So it's like it's a jump too far for us almost.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think, I mean, the ambitions of Tesla and Musk show that, they're planning on doing really big things. So I think, don't rule it out. But
well, I mean, he's open sourced the technology, hasn't he? So that anyone can make a Hyperloop. I don't know if that's a sign of a perfect future, or if it's a sign that he doesn't have enough confidence to do it himself. But I guess we'll see in the next few years. So finally, and you touched upon this briefly, where do these technological advances leave trains? It seems that our rail network's been a bit left behind, Bobby.
Yeah, and with regards to commuting in London, if you can self-drive in and then that car can go home and then pick you up later, trains are going to struggle even more.
Ed?
Yeah, I don't really sort of know where things are going with trains really, because you actually even go elsewhere within Europe and you have the advantage of much more space in each carriage because you have double-decker trains. And yet my understanding, although I may not be right on this, is that such things just aren't possible over here because of the limited infrastructure that already exists. So the sort of tunnels that the trains go through simply can't all be expanded to allow this larger carriage. So bar innovations like Crossrail, which obviously intended to have an enormous impact on people getting into and out of London, I don't see how things are going to change particularly quickly on the antiquated railways that sort of most people get to work on.
So a lack of investment essentially leads to a lack of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pessimistic note to end on. Oh well, all the same, thank you very much for watching. This has been The Future of Transport. I'm Alan Martin.